Hello. Today I'll be talking about the MIT Energy Initiative. It's a podcast owned by MIT. Um, so for today, I listened to a series of podcasts. The first one I listened to is titled "Emissions Trading and Paris Agreement, Article 6." It was led by or hosted by Emily Dahl, who was at the UN Climate Change Conference. Um, for this part of the podcast, she talked about her and the other host talked about the linking of emission trading systems, and what that is one way for governments to um, put a price on emitting carbon emission. And with this, the companies can choose to reduce their carbon footprint or buy or link with other companies from offset projects. So basically, a company can collaborate with another company to try and reduce their carbon footprint. So if one company isn't good at it, the other company that does have better like reducing the carbon footprint would help out the other company. Um, they've also tried doing this with countries as well, with the United States and Switzerland being the first ones. The U.S. being able to collaborate with them to try and get help reducing their carbon footprint. I do know that Switzerland is very good at that with their carbon footprint, so it's very beneficial for the U.S. to try and get that assistance from the Swiss. Um, this also puts a price on carbon, which is an effective way to deal with the externalities that cause climate change. And they also talked about the Paris Rulebook, which are series of rules that help countries implement the Paris Agreement. That's the first one. The second one was titled "Climate Policy Paths for Latin America and Asian Nations." This was also led again by Emily Dahl. She was reporting with Rob McKeel, and who's the CMO, and GE Power VP. In this one, they talked about a lot of countries in the Southeast Asia are reliant on coal, as they're also still going through their industrial age, as well as African nations. So in order to try and combat climate change, as they're trying to transition through that stage, they're offering MIT and GE are collaborating to offer those nations some alternative energy. So, and energy and technology as well. One thing that they considered was microgrids, which is very cheap and it's very useful for small islands or small countries, or countries who cannot afford what big nations have. So basically, developing nations as well. Indonesia. For Indonesia, I know MIT is trying to get electricity out to the entire country as a way of helping out the people, trying to make sure everyone in the country has access to electricity. Their goal isn't to provide a complete solution to climate change, but provide some type of solution. So they're not trying to provide a complete solution, because again, what works for one country cannot work for a different country. So, like for example, Argentina, in the podcast I mentioned Argentina. Something that didn't work for Germany worked for Argentina. They just did a certain tweak to their ruling or policy, and it ended up working out for them. The third podcast I listened to was titled "Game Changing Fusion," which was also led again which was hosted by Emily Dahl, as well as Rob McKeel. This is a collaboration between MIT again and GE, and again they're trying to help control the carbon emission that Latin American countries are producing. And like I said, not every country that produce that, and every country that that is, oh, my tongue is tied. Not every country, not every formula that works for one country is going to work for another country. So each country has to develop their own way of trying to control their carbon footprint. Just like each company has to develop their own way of controlling their carbon footprint. There is no universal formula. So they're trying to, and also they're trying to make, just as they were trying to do in Indonesia, they're trying to make electricity accessible to a lot of countries in South America as well. So yeah, from all the podcasts that I've listened to, I've liked this one the most. It's been very informative. I didn't know that colleges were collaborating with doing research with big companies to try and combat this. I just thought it was a big nationwide thing, so each nation had their own way of controlling it. I do know that some companies do have like some way of trying to maybe move to a more eco-friendly materials, maybe rather than reusing new materials, try and reuse anything that is from like anything that has been reused. So yeah, this was an interesting podcast, and I'm going to continue listening to all the podcasts they have in the future. This is my video. Thank you.